So just how bad are the Germans? In 1871, Bismarck attempted to unite Germany into an empire. We would call it the Second Reich, I suppose. And when he did so, he created a Germany which became very much a military powerhouse between that date, 1871, right through to about 1945, realistically. There was a gap perhaps in the 1920s. It came on the tail end of a number of vicious wars with Austria, with France, and it showed that Germany was very much a militaristic nation led by the Prussian military, as it was known, Prussia being the biggest of the states. Before that, Germany was made up of a number of different states. And it became to the point that by the time of the Second World War, in 1939 to 1945, Germany had a reputation of, I suppose we would call it, something approaching military evil, responsible for the Shoah, the Holocaust, the death of so many Jewish people, so many gypsies, so many homosexuals, that it goes down in history as infamous. And yet, during that time, Germany also produced great poets, great composers, Brahms, Richard Strauss. Perhaps the most obvious example would be Wagner, who was both a dreadful anti-Semitic German and yet also the writer of some of the greatest music ever. Because, of course, this presentation is nothing to do with Germany. It's to do with the fact that it seems that bad and good seem to go together hand in hand. I remember one of the great quotes from something called process theology: the capacity to create and the capacity to destroy go hand in hand. Humans have the ability to both be appallingly awful and yet through it, from it, and because of it, do immense good. I'll give you some other examples, if I may. In the recent COVID pandemic, one of my jobs was to ensure that we could carry on teaching. I had to set up remote classrooms. I had to ensure there was technical expertise to do that. I had to ensure systems worked to allow pupils to carry on learning, even though, because of lockdown, they weren't able to attend school. We'd never have done that, never have gone through that level of effort if it hadn't been for the fact that there'd been the most appalling pandemic responsible for many, many deaths. It's almost as if you need really bad things to happen in order for good things to come from it. There's no secret and there's no surprise that some of the greatest music ever written was written by people who had tortured and appalling lives. That's what motivated them to write the music. You could give the example of the blues in America, drawn from a history of slavery and poverty, which actually led to some of the most amazing music ever written. But it's not the only example. How many novels were actually written by people who actually had dreadful home lives, their mental health was appalling, and yet because of it they were able to be creative and they were able to achieve and write things which nobody else could even imagine possible. So we may reflect on Germany in the Second World War, and this presentation isn't to defend them in any way, sense or form. Of course it's not. But what it does remind us is that war and suffering and disease and appalling things can bring out the best of us, can cause us to achieve things that we wouldn't otherwise be motivated or able to achieve. The strides in medicine, the strides in science that were brought about by war are obvious examples. So I leave you with this thought. Let's not be beastly to the Germans. Let's reflect rather that it was because of Germany and its appalling militarism between 1870 and 1945 that actually transformed our world in many good ways that we wouldn't otherwise have done. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Please get more people watching it. I need the money. Great to have seen you, and thanks ever so much. Cheers. Take care.